Coral Gables, an elegant enclave of Miami known for its lush landscapes and Mediterranean revival architecture, was where I found myself after moving for a job opportunity. The tree-lined streets and charming neighborhoods seemed like the perfect backdrop for my new life. Little did I know, my new job as a dog walker would lead me into a mystery that was anything but charming. My name is Emily, and I had always loved dogs. So, when I stumbled upon a job posting for a dog walker in Coral Gables, I jumped at the chance. My first client was Mrs. Rodriguez, a sweet elderly woman with a beautiful home surrounded by gardens filled with blooming flowers. She had two playful Dalmatians named Spot and Dot, who were always eager for their daily walks. The routine was simple: pick up Spot and Dot from Mrs. Rodriguez's home, stroll through the picturesque streets of Coral Gables, and return them home with wagging tails and tired paws. Everything was going smoothly until one foggy morning changed everything. It was a Tuesday, and the dense fog blanketed the streets, reducing visibility to just a few feet ahead. I arrived at Mrs. Rodriguez's home, the fog making the garden seem mystical and ethereal. Spot and Dot greeted me with their usual enthusiasm, their spots barely visible in the mist. As we ventured out into the fog-shrouded streets, I felt an eerie silence envelop us. The usual sounds of the neighborhood, the chirping of birds, the distant hum of traffic, were muted, replaced by a haunting stillness. We had been walking for about 15 minutes when I noticed something strange. Footprints appeared on the wet pavement ahead of us, leading off the main road and into a narrow alley. They seemed fresh, as if someone had walked there just moments before. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to follow the footprints, Spot and Dot eagerly trotting beside me. The alley was dimly lit, the fog making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. As we ventured deeper into the alley, I felt a sense of unease creeping over me, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The footprints led us to a dead end where a dilapidated building stood, its windows boarded up, its walls covered in graffiti. The atmosphere was oppressive, the silence deafening. Spot and Dot began to growl softly, their hackles raised, their eyes fixed on something in the shadows. I strained my eyes, trying to make out what had caught their attention, and then I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at us from the darkness, their intensity piercing through the fog, sending shivers down my spine. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response. The eyes remained fixed on us, unblinking, unmoving. Feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity, I cautiously approached the building, Spot and Dot close behind. The closer we got, the more the eyes seemed to retreat, disappearing deeper into the shadows. We reached the entrance of the building, the door hanging off its hinges, the darkness inside impenetrable. Spot and Dot hesitated, their growls growing louder, their bodies tense with anticipation. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside, the dogs following closely behind. The air was stale, the smell of mold and decay overwhelming. I shuddered, my flashlight revealing a maze of empty rooms and corridors, their walls covered in graffiti, their floors littered with debris. We explored the building for what felt like hours, the eerie silence broken only by the sound of our footsteps and the occasional squeak of rodents. But despite our efforts, we found no trace of the mysterious eyes, no hint of the person or creature that had led us into this forsaken place. Exhausted and unnerved, we finally emerged from the building, the fog still thick, the mystery unsolved. Spot and Dot seemed relieved, their tails wagging as we made our way back to Mrs. Rodriguez's home. When we arrived, Mrs. Rodriguez greeted us with a smile, oblivious to the strange adventure we had just embarked on. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Emily," she chuckled. I laughed nervously, dismissing her comment with a wave of my hand, but deep down I knew something was amiss, something that defied explanation. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn back to the dilapidated building, the mystery of the glowing eyes consuming my thoughts. I spent hours researching local history, trying to uncover any clues that might explain the strange occurrences. And then one fateful day, I stumbled upon an old newspaper article dated from the 1950s. The headline read, Local mystery: woman vanishes in Coral Gables. The article detailed the disappearance of a young woman named Clara Martinez, last seen walking her 2 Dalmatians near her home. As I read further, my heart sank. Clara had vanished without a trace. Her dogs were found wandering the streets alone, their leashes still attached, their collars stained with blood. The article mentioned a dilapidated building in Coral Gables, rumored to be haunted, a place where people had reported seeing strange, glowing eyes in the darkness. Could it be the same building I had explored with Spot and Dot? Was Clara's spirit still searching for answers, haunting the very place where she had disappeared? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was connected to Clara's story, that somehow her spirit had led me to the building, hoping I could uncover the truth behind her mysterious disappearance. Determined to find answers, I returned to the building one last time, armed with a camera and a notebook, ready to document any evidence of Clara's presence. As I ventured deeper into the building, the atmosphere grew more oppressive, the silence more deafening, but this time I felt a sense of purpose, a determination to uncover the truth no matter the cost. And then I saw them. The glowing eyes, brighter and more intense than before, staring back at me from the shadows. I raised my camera, snapping photos frantically, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling with fear and excitement. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the eyes vanished, leaving behind only the haunting silence of the abandoned building. I reviewed the photos on my camera, hoping to find evidence of Clara's spirit, proof that I wasn't just imagining things. And there, in one of the photos, I saw a faint outline of a woman, her features blurred, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I had done it. I had uncovered the truth, solved the mystery that had haunted Coral Gables for decades. Armed with my evidence, I shared Clara's story with the world, hoping to bring closure to her family, to finally put her spirit to rest. As I walked away from the dilapidated building for the last time, Spot and Dot by my side, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that Clara's spirit could finally find its way home. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the sprawling city. Mia, a freelance graphic designer, had just moved to California and was excited to explore her new surroundings. She decided to take up dog walking as a side gig, not just for the extra cash, but also to get to know her new neighborhood better. Griffith Park, with its vast open spaces and winding trails, seemed like the perfect place to start. It was a sunny afternoon when Mia took her first client, a spirited golden retriever named Max, for a walk in the park. The dog seemed eager to explore, his tail wagging as he ventured deeper into the woods. As they walked along the secluded trails, Mia couldn't shake. She brushed it off as her imagination running wild, attributing it to the unfamiliarity of her new surroundings. Days turned into weeks, and Mia continued her dog-walking routine, but the feeling of being watched persisted, growing stronger with each visit to Griffith Park. Max, too, began acting strangely. He would often stop abruptly, his ears perked up, as if listening to something only he could hear. One evening, as Mia was walking Max along a particularly dense trail, they came across an old abandoned cabin. The windows were boarded up and the paint was peeling off the walls. Despite its eerie appearance, Mia felt drawn to the cabin. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to take a closer look. As she approached the cabin, she noticed strange symbols carved into the door. They looked ancient, like something out of a forgotten folklore tale. Mia felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't resist the urge to explore further. She carefully pushed open the creaky door, revealing a dark and musty interior. Inside, the cabin was filled with dusty old furniture and cobwebs. Mia's flashlight illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She felt a sense of unease, as if the cabin held secrets best left undisturbed. Suddenly, she heard a faint voice, a sound so soft it was almost a whisper. "Get out." Startled, Mia turned around, but saw no one. She called out, thinking it might be someone playing a prank on her, but there was no response. Feeling uneasy, Mia quickly exited the cabin, taking Max with her. As they walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. She quickened her pace, eager to leave the cabin and its unsettling atmosphere behind. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. The events of the evening replayed in her mind, each detail more haunting than the last. She decided to do some research on the history of Griffith Park, hoping to find an explanation for the strange occurrences. To her horror, she discovered that the area where the cabin stood was once home to a Native American tribe. Legend had it that they were driven out by settlers, their land taken from. Some even claimed that the spirits of the tribe still haunted the park, seeking revenge on those who dared to trespass on their sacred grounds. Determined to put an end to the haunting, Mia returned to Griffith Park the next day, armed with sage and protective charms. She made her way to the cabin, hoping to cleanse the area and appease the restless spirits. As she approached the cabin, she noticed that the symbols on the door had changed. They now formed a warning, a message written in a language she didn't understand. Ignoring the ominous signs, Mia lit the sage and began chanting a cleansing ritual. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing the flame of her sage. The temperature dropped and Mia felt a presence behind her. She turned around slowly, coming face to face with a shadowy figure. It was a Native American warrior, his face painted with symbols, his eyes burning with anger. Mia froze, paralyzed by fear as the warrior raised his hand, pointing towards the exit. "Leave," he commanded, his voice echoing through the cabin. Terrified, Mia grabbed Max and fled from the cabin, never looking back. As she ran, she could hear the warrior's laughter, a bone-chilling sound that echoed through the trees. From that day on, Mia avoided Griffith Park, refusing to set foot near the haunted trails. She continued her dog-walking business in other parts of the city, but the memory of that fateful day stayed with her, a constant reminder of the supernatural forces that lurked in the shadows of Los Angeles. Years later, Mia moved away from California, seeking a fresh start in a new city. But no matter where she went, she could never escape the haunting trails of Griffith Park, a reminder that some stories are best left untold. Miami, with its vibrant beaches and lively nightlife, has always been a city of contrasts. Beneath the glitz and glamour, the city holds secrets, some buried deeper than others. My name is Alex, and what started as a simple job in Miami's affluent Brickell neighborhood turned into a nightmarish journey I would never forget. I had recently moved to Miami, looking for a fresh start after a messy breakup. I found a job as a dog walker, a gig that seemed perfect for me. I love dogs, and the flexible hours allowed me to explore the city. My first client was Mrs. Hamilton, an elderly woman living in a high-rise overlooking Biscayne Bay. She had two adorable golden retrievers, Max and Bella, who quickly became my favorite companions. The routine was simple: pick up Max and Bella from Mrs. Hamilton's apartment, take them for a walk along the bay, and return them home before heading to my next appointment. The dogs were well behaved, and the walks were usually uneventful until one fateful evening in October. The sun had just set, casting a warm glow over the bay. I arrived at Mrs. Hamilton's apartment, and as usual, she greeted me with a smile, handing over the leashes to Max and "Thank you, Alex. They always seem so happy after their walks with you," she said. "It's my pleasure, Mrs. Hamilton. They are such sweet dogs," I replied. We chatted for a few minutes before I headed out, the dogs eagerly pulling me toward the bay. As we walked along the waterfront, I noticed something unusual, a shadowy figure standing near the edge of the water. At first, I thought it was just another dog walker, but as we got closer, I realized there was something off about the person. The figure was tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the dim light. It seemed to be staring intently at something in the water, completely oblivious to its surroundings. Max and Bella sensed my unease, growling softly as we passed by. I quickened my pace, eager to put some distance between us and the mysterious stranger, but as we continued along the bay, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to come alive, every whisper of the wind sending shivers down my spine. I tried to dismiss my fears, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I heard it. a soft, haunting melody carried by the breeze. It was a lullaby, the same one my mother used to sing to me as a child. This sound was so familiar, yet so out of place, echoing eerily across the water. I stopped dead in my tracks, the dogs pulling at their leashes, whining softly. The melody grew louder, its haunting notes filling the air. I looked around frantically, trying to locate the source of the sound, but there was no one in sight. "Come on, Max, Bella, let's go," I whispered, my voice trembling. But the dogs refused to move, their eyes fixed on the water, their bodies tense with fear. I felt a cold chill run down my spine as I turned to face the bay once more, the melody now deafening in its intensity. And then I saw her, a woman dressed in a flowing white dress, standing waist-deep in the water, her face hidden beneath a veil. Her arms were outstretched, her fingers beckoning me closer. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to look away. The woman's eyes were pools of darkness, her gaze piercing through me, filling me with a terror unlike anything I had ever known. "Come," she whispered, her voice as cold as ice. "Join me." I felt myself being pulled toward her, the world around me fading away. Max and Bella's frantic barking snapped me back to reality, their desperate tugs finally breaking the spell. I turned and ran, the dogs racing beside me, their barks echoing in my ears. I didn't stop until we reached Mrs. Hamilton's apartment, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Mrs. Hamilton greeted us with a look of concern, sensing something was wrong. "Is everything okay, Alex?" she asked. I saw something by the bay," I stammered, struggling to find the words. A woman. She was calling to me." Mrs. Hamilton's face paled, her eyes whitening in fear. "You saw her too," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The Lady of Biscayne Bay." She told me the legend of the lady, a spirit said to haunt the shores of Biscayne Bay, luring unsuspecting souls to their watery graves. According to local lore, the lady was a young bride who drowned on her wedding night, her spirit forever trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. I listened in horror as Mrs. Hamilton recounted stories of other sightings, of people disappearing without a trace, their bodies never found. She urged me to be careful, to avoid the bay at night, especially during the full moon when the lady's power was strongest. I left Mrs. Hamilton's apartment that night, shaken to the core, my mind reeling from the encounter. I couldn't shake the image of the lady from my mind, her haunting eyes etched into my memory, her chilling voice echoing in my ears. For weeks, I avoided the bay, taking the dogs on walks through the city streets instead, but no matter how hard I'd ride, I couldn't escape the feeling that the lady was watching me, waiting for the right moment to claim me as her own. One evening, unable to resist the pull any longer, I found myself drawn back to the bay. The moon was full, its silver light casting a mystical glow over the water. Max and Bella seemed uneasy, their senses heightened, their eyes scanning the shoreline for any sign of danger. I tried to reassure them, telling myself that the legend was just a story, a cautionary tale passed down through generations. But as we walked along the waterfront, I felt that familiar chill creep back into my bones, the melody of the lullaby haunting me once more. And then I saw her, the Lady of Biscayne Bay, standing at the water's edge, her eyes locked onto mine, her arms outstretched, beckoning me closer. This time, I didn't run. I couldn't. The lady's power was too strong, her allure too tempting to resist. I felt myself being drawn to her, the world around me fading away, until there was nothing left but the lady and the water. As I stepped closer, I heard a voice calling out to me, a voice filled with love and longing, a voice I recognized as my mother's. "Alex, come back to me," she whispered, her words cutting through the darkness, breaking the lady's spell. I opened my eyes, the world rushing back into focus, the lady disappearing into the mist. Max and Bella were barking frantically, pulling me away from the water, their desperate pleas snapping me back to reality. I turned and ran, the dogs racing beside me, their barks echoing in my ears. I didn't stop until we reached my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I knew then that I had to leave Miami to escape the lady's grasp before it was too late. I packed my bags that night, saying a tearful goodbye to Max and Bella, grateful for their loyalty and love. As I boarded the plane the next morning, I looked back at the city I had once called home, the bay shimmering in the distance, the lady's haunting melody still lingering in the air. I knew I would never forget my time in Miami, the beauty of the bay, the warmth of its people, the mystery of the lady of Biscayne Bay, but most of all, I would never forget the love and courage that saved me from a fate worse than death.